excuse the gameplay, but it's kind of mid because I haven't really been playing all that much, and I also been performing really bad in almost all of my matches I've been playing. There's a problem with tank players in Marvel Rivals, and a lot of people don't see this simply because if you're playing tank, you're automatically seen as a team player. And this is more apparent if tank isn't your main role to begin with, because you're automatically sacrificing a lot of your enjoyment just to play tank. Not only that, every player in Marvel Rivals, even the people in Gold, realize that playing tank is so miserable. You kind of don't have the same damage output as DPS players, so you can't really farm eliminations and carry your team. And you can't be focusing on your healing stat because tank players don't really have like a stat like that, where they can just be solely focused on that stat. So this automatically plays into them being a team player. They have a lot of things going for them that basically make them a non-issue in Marvel Rivals. But once you get into higher ranks and you have dedicated tank mains on your team, you start realizing there's some problems with them. And the first issue is that tank players are hard stuck, but they don't believe they're at fault. Now this can be summed up for every role out there, but tank players are really this role to begin with because they always like to hide behind their role to begin with. Like, well, I'm playing tank, my impact is very minimal compared to DPS or support. But the thing about it is that every role in Marvel Rivals different level of impact in this game. It's just that tanks has to be the first initiator, so they basically are setting up their DPS to get eliminations. So if their DPS isn't getting eliminations, then you can't really blame tanks for not being able to frontline. But like I said, once you reach these higher ranks, you start realizing that if your tank is just there absorbing damage or not, avoiding just not getting eliminated, so basically playing in a scared way, you realize that tank actually becomes an issue, but most tank players don't recognize this. And it's more apparent when you realize that some of these tank players have Lord icons or champion icons on their favorite heroes, like a champion mag. They don't really see themselves as a problem because they're playing because they have this champion Lord icon on mag. But going back to what I was saying, I'll give you another example. When they're always leading the charge or always initiating fights, they expect everyone to follow through. Not their DPS, but also their support players on their team. They expect them to push up with them. But that's the thing, they neglect everything else for the sole purpose of just initiating fights. And a good example would be like a Hulk that just goes into a 1v6, gets eliminated, and then says there's no heals, even though they're out of line of sight and they're super far away for even any support to catch up and heal them. And even if there was a White Fox or even someone that has a lot more mobility like Ultron, most of them would just be getting eliminated with them. So it wouldn't even be an effective push. But these are the same team players that end up being hard stuck in GM, but because they don't believe they're at fault because they're playing this role where everyone just needs to follow through, they don't think they're at fault. They don't think they're the ones to blame for the team's loss. But this is going to be my second point, is that let's say you run into a tank that isn't toxic, isn't just diving in, isn't just initiating fights, but it's actually playing back a little bit and waiting for the whole team to not be staggered and basically push together, but also peeling and being aware. So basically disengaging and engaging when they need to, when their supports are on cooldown, or when they're on low HP. The thing about these players is that they tend to be just focused on playing good rather than actually performing good, if that makes sense. Where they have everything dialed in, but they're not really experimenting or pushing themselves further to play better. And you really see this around Diamond, I guess, or around Plat, maybe a less in GM, but this will also apply to the people that play Mag, or that play Strange, or that play these shield tanks, and they have like champion lord icons on them, because they kind of fall into the same realm where like they watch tier lists, they know everything about this game, they know how to do their animation cancels, they know how to play objectively good, but the thing about it is that they keep focusing on this entirely. This is why they also end up being hard stuck. But these are the worst type of tank players to run into, because I think the only good point I've ever made about them is that they don't think they're the ones to blame, because their impact isn't that major compared to every other role in this game. If you don't know what I'm talking about still, look at any game you played, and you ever lost a match where you had two tank players and you still lost, and the tank players were like a champion Strange, or maybe like a champion Venom with a champion Mag, or you just had two players, and one was like a champion just shield tank. You guys, and they end up doing bad. They don't get a lot of eliminations. They don't do a lot of damage blocked. They keep getting picked off, even though the supports were always healing them. And you'd be like, why are they so bad? Like, why are they so garbage? And that's because they know everything about the game, but their performance, they're not focused on like mechanics at all. They think just knowing how to play tank, knowing all the struggles, knowing everything they need to do is somehow going to replace the actual, mechanics, the actual like reaction time, combinations they can come up with their own abilities is going to make up for what they need to do in order to rank up. And this goes into my third point is that now they start being toxic. It's easy to point out the Hulk main or the Venom mains that just dive in and die and end up being toxic. But once these players that think they know how to play end up being toxic, this is when like the real problem starts happening. Because now they're giving out callouts. Well, I should have started that. I should have started off with that. Is that once they start giving callouts, even though they're not toxic, is when the team really falls because they think since they know what they're talking about, since they're playing a role that requires a lot of meticulous planning, that they can finally give good efficient callouts. And you really see this in your games. There's always that tank player giving callouts, telling the team how to push, when to push with them, telling the DPS players when to pop their ult or when to combo. But they usually end up performing bad because they think they have everything dialed in. Like I said, I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat that, but they really believe they have everything dialed in. And I guess the part of just being toxic doesn't really play a big role. If they're toxic, they either end up throwing, just start screaming at their supports or their DPS players for not doing their jobs, even though they're creating a lot of space. That would be like one thing that you have to deal with, but it's not that big of an issue. Now, these would be like, I'm going to make two main points, and this kind of what really affects us and kind of us as players that are not tank players and what makes tank players a problem. Since I already outlined all the things that make them bad, the way they affect us is that once you're playing like GM or higher, or you start going further, when you get these tank players, even though they know how to play tank a little bit, they have champion lore icons, like I said, the thing about it is that they don't take any accountability or they don't really self-reflect. So they kind of fall into like every player in this game where they just don't reflect at all. But they think they know what they're doing simply because they know how to frontline play off their cooldowns. But this is how it gets affected, because let's say you're actually a good support player or a good DPS player. If your tank can't be sufficient or isn't a team player even though they're playing tank, that's when like your game is literally cooked, because tank has like a important impact in his role, and that's being able to absorb a lot of damage, be annoying, bait off a lot of cooldowns from supports and even tanks, always be the front line. And if you can't do that, if no one's taking attention away from DPS players or support players, your front line automatically fails and you guys just end up losing the match. So basically you can't provide any good sustain, you can't provide good healing, they can't provide any good setup for DPS players to do their job. And when you have these tank players that have these characteristics that just don't self-reflect because they are playing the most miserable role, they know how to play, that aren't just sufficient enough, you basically end up losing more games because of them. And nobody really says anything because they're always seen as team players. And my second point is that they're inherently selfish. I think I'm just going to drill this point so many times, but a lot of people don't think tank players are selfish, because what do they need to be selfish about? You know, they don't have a stat that they can farm, like DPS or support, where they can be like, see, I'm always farming my stats and that means I'm good. And they don't have really like anything they need to play off to be selfish as well. But the thing about it is that every Marvel Rival players fall into the same category, is that everyone is selfish inherently when it comes to the game, is that their selfishness is really brought out in this game. And Marvel Rivals kind of makes this apparent too, because they basically make every hero, every ability have self-sustaining something, so they can basically be solo players and still win the game. Just look at all the self-sustaining abilities that every support got. It's because nobody wants to play as a team, and which I don't blame them, because Marvel Rivals, well, I don't blame them, but it makes sense that they will add those abilities. But this also applies to tank players. Since they're selfish, most of them just want to play mag, want to be that team player, want to be that one frontlining. You know, it feels good to play tank. You know, you're always the one, you know, that backbone, the one doing a lot of work. It seems fun. You're doing a lot of managing. You're basically the backbone of your whole team, especially if you can play tank really good. But the thing about it is that these players get too hung up on this. They get too hungry about wanting to be this. So they basically end up having the same. There's a side note I'm making right now, but it's not that they also get hung up on this, but they want greater. They basically want to be more than this. They don't want to be just stuck to just being the backbone. They actually want to be, you know, like a DPS player where they're getting more eliminations. Main character syndrome of DPS players. The only difference is that they go different ways of going about it. Instead of getting eliminations, you're the one setting up your team. You're the one, you know, getting a good old ultimate for Gru Strange with Mag, you know, picking off that support that was popping their ult, and you just use your ult as Mag and eliminate them. You know, a bunch of these things kind of play into like the selfishness of trying to like pop off and be that team player, be that player that carries. And I think I'll just throw in third point, which kind of sums up everything I said, is that they don't take any responsibility or accountability or self-reflection in their own gameplay. And it kind of doesn't make sense, because tank does require a lot of reflection to become better, especially since you can't get eliminations. You kind of have to think harder and basically are pushed more to become a better player in order to see more results. For example, let's say a good example would be like Spider-Man. You can't just get easy elimination with him unless you're using your ult, but you need to practice like a bunch of combos just to be a somewhat good player for your team. I guess I made a bad point there, but just think about people on Reddit. Like every time I see a tank player and they get on their mic, it kind of reminds me of these Reddit players, the people that play on Reddit. I mean, not Reddit, people that are always on Reddit, is that they think they know more than everyone. They think they know how to execute perfectly. They studied it. They know everything, all the ins and out. But when it actually comes time to perform, they end up just doing so bad, but still end up blaming everyone because they believe they know more than everyone else. That's basically how I sum up these tank players that become a big problem in this game. None of them want to play super as a team. They don't want to play too much as a team player. Like they want to be part of the team, but they don't want to be that team player that. But yeah, I don't think team players really, they are a big problem if you're a DPS or support player because they do have a big impact in this game. But for me, I think they fall really below everyone else because there's only a little bit of tank players in this game. I swear, if they were to add roll queue into this game, tank would be the number one fastest queue in this game. Or like there will be just like a negative queue time for tank. Like if you queue tank, you just get into a game automatically because nobody likes playing tank in Marvel Rivals. But yeah, if you enjoyed my takes, if you actually agree with my takes, if you watch the whole thing, maybe subscribe. I never ask people to subscribe, but I will actually appreciate people actually subscribe. Or maybe you just forget to subscribe. But yeah, I only do it if you actually like my content.